I am Margot Gomez, 29 years old, and until 3 months ago I was married to Sebastian Blackwood for 6 years. I supported him through law school while building my career as a pediatric nurse, believing we were partners working toward a shared future. His mother, Eleanor, was more than a mother-in-law to me. She was my mentor and closest confidant, something that Sebastian never understood and secretly resented. When Eleanor died and left Sebastian $45 million, everything changed in an instant. The man I thought I knew disappeared, replaced by a stranger who looked me in the eye and said, "You were just practice until something better came along." Little did he know that Eleanor had anticipated this exact moment and built something into her will that would turn his betrayal into the greatest mistake of his life. If you're watching this, let me know where you're from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how karma delivered justice when my ex-husband discovered what his inheritance really meant. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona, where my parents, both immigrants from Mexico, instilled in me the values of hard work, family loyalty, and education as the pathway to a better life. My father worked double shifts at a manufacturing plant while my mother cleaned office buildings at night to pay for my nursing school tuition. Every sacrifice they made was an investment in my future, and I never took their dedication for granted. From childhood, I was drawn to caring for others. I volunteered at local clinics during high school and knew nursing was my calling. The combination of medical knowledge, emotional support, and practical problem-solving required in pediatric nursing appealed to my nurturing nature and analytical mind. I graduated summa cum laude from Arizona State University's nursing program and immediately found work at Phoenix Children's Hospital. My early years as a nurse were challenging but fulfilling. Working with sick children and their families taught me patience, resilience, and the importance of hope during dark times. I quickly gained recognition for my clinical skills and compassionate bedside manner. Families specifically requested me for their children's care, and physicians trusted my assessments and recommendations. I met Sebastian during a charity fundraiser at the hospital where I was volunteering to organize donations for families who couldn't afford their children's medical expenses. He stood out immediately, tall, confident, impeccably dressed, with an easy smile that seemed to light up the room. Sebastian was a second-year law student at Arizona State, volunteering for community service hours required by his program. "You seem to know everyone here," he said, approaching me with 2 cups of coffee. "Are you the event coordinator?" I laughed, explaining that I was just a nurse who believed in the cause. Sebastian seemed genuinely impressed by my dedication and asked thoughtful questions about my work. Unlike most people who quickly change subjects when discussing pediatric illness, he listened with genuine interest and empathy. Our chemistry was immediate and undeniable. Sebastian was articulate, ambitious, and passionate about using law to help people who couldn't help themselves. He spoke eloquently about pursuing civil rights law and making a difference in underserved communities. His idealism matched my own commitment to service, and I found myself believing we shared the same core values. After 3 months of dating, I was completely captivated. Sebastian was unlike anyone I had ever met, worldly, educated, and seemingly committed to making a positive impact. He came from a wealthy family in Scottsdale, but unlike the entitled rich kids I had encountered in college, he seemed grounded and aware of his privilege. "I want to use my advantages to help people who don't have them," he told me early in our relationship. "Too many lawyers just chase money. I want to chase justice." Sebastian proposed during our 1-year anniversary dinner at a restaurant neither of us could really afford. The ring was modest but beautiful, and his proposal was heartfelt and romantic. He spoke about building a life together based on shared values and mutual support. I said yes without hesitation, believing I had found my life partner. Our wedding was a small but elegant affair. Sebastian's family covered most expenses, while my parents contributed what they could with evident pride. The ceremony reflected both our backgrounds, Sebastian's family's sophistication combined with my family's warmth and authenticity. Looking back now, I should have paid more attention to the subtle tensions between our families during the planning process. Sebastian's mother, Eleanor Blackwood, was an intimidating presence at our first meeting. At 58, she carried herself with the poise of someone accustomed to commanding rooms and having her opinions matter. She had built a successful interior design business from nothing after Sebastian's father died when Sebastian was 12, raising him alone while growing her company into a regional powerhouse. I was nervous about making a good impression, knowing Sebastian respected his mother's judgment immensely. Eleanor invited me to lunch at an upscale restaurant in Scottsdale, and I arrived early, wearing my best professional outfit and mentally rehearsing responses to questions I anticipated. To my surprise, Eleanor was warm and engaging from the moment we sat down. She asked thoughtful questions about my background, career goals, and family. Rather than the interrogation I expected, our conversation flowed naturally. Eleanor seemed genuinely interested in my perspectives on healthcare, child advocacy, and social justice. "Sebastian tells me you work in pediatric oncology," she said over our salads. "That must be emotionally demanding work." I explained how rewarding it was to help children and families navigate the most difficult experiences of their lives, and how the resilience of young patients inspired me daily. Eleanor listened intently, asking follow-up questions that demonstrated genuine curiosity rather than polite interest. After lunch, Eleanor invited me to see her design studio. The space was stunning, a converted warehouse filled with fabric samples, furniture pieces, and design boards for various projects. She walked me through her current work, explaining her design philosophy and business approach. "I believe beautiful spaces can heal people," Eleanor told me as we examined plans for a pediatric wing renovation. "When children are fighting for their lives, their environment should support hope, not add to their fear." That comment revealed the depth of Eleanor's character and marked the beginning of our special relationship. Over the following months, our connection deepened beyond typical in-law politeness into genuine friendship and mentorship. Eleanor began including me in family dinners and holiday celebrations, but more significantly, she sought my input on business decisions related to healthcare facility design. My clinical experience provided insights she valued, and she often called me to discuss projects involving medical spaces. "You understand both the emotional and practical needs of patients and families," Eleanor explained during one of our regular coffee meetings. "That perspective is invaluable in creating healing environments." Sebastian initially seemed pleased that his mother and I got along so well. He would smile approvingly when Eleanor and I discussed design concepts or when she asked for my opinions during family gatherings. However, as our relationship deepened, I began noticing subtle signs of discomfort from Sebastian. During family dinners, if Eleanor and I became engrossed in conversation about a project or shared interest, Sebastian would interrupt with jokes or attempts to redirect attention to himself. When Eleanor called me directly to discuss work matters, Sebastian would ask why she hadn't called him instead. "Mother values your opinion more than mine sometimes," he said one evening after Eleanor had spent an hour on the phone with me discussing a children's hospital renovation. His tone was light, but I detected an undertone of resentment. I dismissed these moments as normal family dynamics, not recognizing them as early warning signs of deeper issues. Meanwhile, our marriage faced its first major challenges. Sebastian's law school demands intensified during his final year, and financial pressure mounted. Despite his family's wealth, Sebastian was expected to support himself through school, and our budget was stretched thin between tuition, living expenses, and student loans. I took on extra shifts at the hospital to help cover our expenses, often working 12-hour days followed by 4-hour night shifts at a clinic. The physical and emotional demands of nursing combined with financial stress tested our relationship, but I believed we were building something together that would pay off once Sebastian graduated and started his career. Sebastian struggled more than he admitted with the academic pressure and competition in law school. His grades were good but not exceptional, and he didn't receive offers from the prestigious firms where he had hoped to work. The gap between his expectations and reality created stress that he often took out on our relationship. "I feel like I'm disappointing everyone," he confided one evening after receiving another rejection letter. "My classmates are getting offers from major firms, and I'm still waiting to hear from mid-level places." I reassured him that building a meaningful career took time and that his commitment to public service law was admirable, even if it didn't lead to immediate prestige or high salaries. Sebastian seemed to appreciate my support, but I could see the rejection letters were affecting his confidence and mood. During this period, Eleanor became an even stronger presence in my life. She offered emotional support during Sebastian's stressful periods and practical advice about managing finances and career decisions. Eleanor also began involving me more deeply in her business, asking me to consult on healthcare-related projects and even offering me part-time work coordinating medical facility designs. "You have an instinct for creating spaces that serve people's real needs," Eleanor told me. "Have you ever considered combining nursing with design consulting?" The idea had never occurred to me, but Eleanor's suggestion planted a seed that would later become important. She encouraged me to take evening classes in interior design, offering to pay for the tuition as an investment in my professional development. Sebastian's reaction to Eleanor's offer was mixed. While he appreciated that it would reduce our financial burden, he seemed uncomfortable with his mother's direct investment in my career. During our discussion about whether I should accept Eleanor's offer, Sebastian made comments that revealed his underlying concerns. "Mother can be controlling when she's helping people," he warned. "She'll expect input on your decisions if she's paying for your education." I found this perspective puzzling, as Eleanor had never been anything but supportive and respectful of my autonomy. Her offer came with no strings attached. She simply believed in my potential and wanted to help me develop it. Against Sebastian's mild objections, I accepted Eleanor's offer and began taking design classes 2 evenings per week. The coursework was challenging but energizing, and I discovered I had a natural aptitude for spatial planning and aesthetic problem-solving. Eleanor became my unofficial mentor, sharing insights from her decades of experience and introducing me to industry contacts. Sebastian graduated from law school with respectable grades and eventually accepted a position with a mid-sized firm specializing in corporate law, not the public service work he had originally planned, but a job that offered good salary and benefits. His starting income was substantial compared to my nursing salary, and for the first time in our marriage, we had financial breathing room. With stable income and reduced stress, I expected our relationship to improve. Instead, subtle changes in Sebastian's behavior began emerging that I initially attributed to normal adjustment to his new career demands. Sebastian's work required longer hours and frequent business dinners, leaving me alone most evenings. When I suggested we plan regular date nights to reconnect, Sebastian said his schedule was too unpredictable for commitments. Our conversations increasingly focused on his work stress and client demands, with little interest in my nursing experiences or design studies. More concerning was Sebastian's changing attitude toward money and lifestyle. His salary allowed us to move to a nicer apartment and upgrade our possessions, changes I appreciated but didn't particularly prioritize. Sebastian, however, seemed increasingly focused on status symbols, expensive clothes, luxury cars, exclusive restaurants, as markers of his professional success. "We can afford nice things now," he said when I questioned the necessity of a $2,000 suit for court appearances. "I need to look the part if I want to advance in this firm." Eleanor noticed changes in Sebastian too, though she was more diplomatic in expressing her concerns. During one of our coffee meetings, she made oblique comments about Sebastian's new priorities and the importance of staying grounded regardless of income level. "Success can be intoxicating," Eleanor observed carefully. "Some people handle it better than others. The key is remembering what truly matters." 2 years into Sebastian's legal career, Eleanor was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was devastating, stage 4, with limited treatment options and an estimated survival time of 6 to 8 months. The news shattered our family, but Eleanor faced her diagnosis with characteristic grace and determination. "I've had a good life and built something meaningful," she told Sebastian and me during the family meeting where she shared her diagnosis. "I want to spend whatever time I have left focusing on what matters most, my relationships, and ensuring my legacy continues positively." Sebastian's reaction to his mother's diagnosis revealed aspects of his character that disturbed me. While he performed appropriate grief and concern in public, his private behavior suggested different priorities. He missed several medical appointments, citing work obligations that seemed suspiciously flexible when other opportunities arose. During Eleanor's chemotherapy treatments, I often accompanied her when Sebastian claimed he couldn't leave work. We spent hours in infusion centers discussing life, dreams, and her hopes for the future. Eleanor used this time to share stories about building her business, raising Sebastian as a single mother, and her philosophy about wealth and responsibility. "Money is a tool, not a goal," Eleanor told me during one chemotherapy session. "The question isn't how much you have, but what you do with it. I've watched wealthy people become miserable and poor people create joy. Character matters more than capital." These conversations deepened my understanding of Eleanor's values and her concerns about Sebastian's relationship with money and success. She never criticized her son directly, but her observations about human nature and wealth suggested she was watching his development with worry. As Eleanor's condition deteriorated, she made specific requests about her care and final arrangements. She wanted to die at home, surrounded by family, with minimal medical intervention beyond comfort care. Eleanor also expressed desire to complete several business projects and finalize her estate planning. Sebastian agreed to these requests but delegated most responsibility to me. While I was honored to care for Eleanor during her final months, Sebastian's absence during this crucial time strained our marriage and revealed his difficulty handling emotional challenges. "I can't watch her fade away," Sebastian told me when I asked why he spent so little time at his mother's bedside. "It's too painful. You're better at this kind of thing than I am." Eleanor's final weeks were spent in her beautiful home, surrounded by the design elements that had brought her joy throughout her career. She remained lucid and engaged until the end, using her remaining energy to complete important conversations and arrangements. One afternoon, when Sebastian was at work despite knowing Eleanor's condition was rapidly declining, she asked to speak with me privately. Eleanor's once strong frame was now frail, but her mind remained sharp and her intentions clear. "Margot, you've been more of a daughter to me than Sebastian has been a son in many ways," she said, holding my hand with surprising strength. "You understand what I tried to teach him about responsibility, compassion, and using privilege to help others." She thanked me for caring for her during her illness and for bringing stability and purpose to Sebastian's life. Eleanor also shared concerns about Sebastian's changing priorities and values since beginning his legal career. "I love my son, but I worry about the man he's becoming," Eleanor confided. "Success and money are revealing aspects of his character that concern me. I see him drifting away from the values I tried to instill." In her final conscious moments, Eleanor squeezed my hand and whispered, "Trust that love and integrity will ultimately prevail. Sometimes the universe has ways of correcting course that we can't see in advance." Eleanor passed away peacefully on a Tuesday morning. I was holding her hand when she took her final breath, having spent the night at her bedside reading aloud from books of poetry she loved. Sebastian arrived 20 minutes after she had died, having stopped for coffee because hospitals make him uncomfortable, a comment that revealed his continued avoidance of difficult emotions. The funeral was held at Eleanor's favorite church, a beautiful stone building where she had worshipped for 30 years. I spent days helping arrange the service, selecting music Eleanor would have appreciated, coordinating flowers, and ensuring every detail honored her memory and values. Sebastian contributed minimally to funeral planning, claiming grief made it difficult for him to focus on practical matters. When I asked for his input on readings or music selections, he deferred to my judgment, saying I knew his mother's preferences better than he did. I delivered Eleanor's eulogy, speaking about her creativity, generosity, and the profound impact she had on everyone who knew her. I described her business philosophy, her commitment to healing spaces, and her belief that wealth carried responsibility to help others. Several attendees approached me afterward, saying the eulogy perfectly captured Eleanor's essence. Sebastian sat in the front row during the service, occasionally dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. However, I noticed his emotional displays seemed performative, timed for moments when others were watching. During the reception, most condolences were directed toward me rather than Sebastian, which I could see bothered him. 3 days after the funeral, we met with Eleanor's estate attorney, Jonathan Pierce, for the reading of her will. The law office was formal and somber, with family members and close friends seated around a polished conference table. Mr. Pierce began with standard legal language before reaching the distribution of Eleanor's assets. To my beloved son, Sebastian Blackwood, I leave my business, Blackwood Designs, valued at approximately $8 million, along with my investment portfolio worth $37 million, for a total inheritance of $45 million. The room fell silent except for Sebastian's sharp intake of breath. His expression transformed instantly from performative grief to barely contained excitement. He gripped my hand so tightly it was painful, but I was too shocked to react immediately. Eleanor had been successful, but none of us had realized the extent of her wealth. Her lifestyle was comfortable but not ostentatious, and she had never discussed specific financial details. The revelation that Sebastian would inherit $45 million stunned everyone present. Mr. Pierce continued reading, detailing smaller bequests to employees, charities, and family friends. I noticed his careful wording regarding Sebastian's inheritance, mentioning provisions and conditions detailed in attached documents. But in the moment, the significance escaped me. Sebastian certainly wasn't listening to these details. His mind was already racing with possibilities. "We need to celebrate," Sebastian announced as soon as we left the attorney's office. Without consulting me, he made reservations at the most expensive restaurant in Scottsdale, ordering champagne and calling friends to share the news. His grief had completely vanished, replaced by euphoric plans for spending his newfound wealth. The dramatic change in Sebastian's behavior began immediately. The next morning, I woke to find him on the phone with a luxury car dealership. By afternoon, he had purchased a $150,000 Mercedes without discussing it with me. When I expressed surprise at the impulsive purchase, he dismissed my concerns with an edge I had never heard before. "It's my inheritance," he said coldly. "I don't need permission to spend it." Within days, financial changes became apparent throughout our household. Sebastian moved large sums into new accounts bearing only his name. When I logged into our joint banking app, I discovered the passwords had been changed. He dismissed my questions about these changes, saying he was organizing things and would explain later. New people suddenly appeared in our lives. Sebastian reconnected with law school classmates I had never heard him mention before. Business associates materialized with investment opportunities requiring immediate attention. Our home, once peaceful, was constantly filled with these strangers discussing deals and ventures. Sebastian's spending escalated dramatically. Designer clothes replaced his entire wardrobe. He spoke casually about purchasing vacation properties in Aspen and Malibu. Dinners at exclusive restaurants became nightly occurrences, rarely with me invited. When I asked about these expenditures, Sebastian acted annoyed. "Do you understand how much money I have now?" he asked dismissively. "This is nothing. You need to adjust your thinking." I tried to reconnect with him, believing grief and sudden wealth were causing temporary behavioral changes. I prepared his favorite meal one evening, setting the table with candles and wine. He never showed up. My calls went to voicemail, and he returned home after midnight smelling of expensive cologne and alcohol. The next morning, I suggested we discuss our future plans now that our financial situation had changed so dramatically. Perhaps I could reduce my hospital hours to focus more on design consulting, or we could finally start the family we had discussed. Sebastian gave vague, non-committal responses while scrolling through his phone. "We have plenty of time to figure that out," he said. "I need to focus on managing this money right now." When I gently suggested grief counseling, noting the dramatic changes in his behavior, Sebastian scoffed. "I don't need therapy," he snapped. "I need you to stop analyzing me and give me some space." His presence in our home became increasingly rare. Some nights he didn't come home at all, offering thin excuses about late business meetings or networking events. When I expressed concern, his replies were curt and annoyed. Our joint checking account, which once contained our shared savings, was nearly empty despite my continued nursing income. Large withdrawals appeared with no explanation. When I asked Sebastian about these financial changes, he brushed me off, saying he had moved funds to better investment vehicles and that I wouldn't understand the complexities. My suspicions grew when credit card statements arrived showing charges for jewelry I had never received and hotel rooms in our own city. Sebastian had also made a down payment on a beachfront condo in San Diego without mentioning it to me. The real estate agent called our home to confirm details, surprised when I knew nothing about the purchase. The confirmation of my fears came through his new assistant at the law firm. Sebastian had recently hired Sophia Chen, a 24-year-old recent college graduate, as his personal assistant. When I called Sebastian's office one afternoon to remind him about a dinner reservation, Sophia answered with unusual familiarity. "Sebastian is in a meeting with clients," she said. "But I can tell him Margot called when he's finished with his appointments for the day." Something in her tone suggested intimate knowledge of Sebastian's schedule and priorities. When I asked when he might be available, she mentioned he had several evening commitments that would keep him busy until late. The way she spoke suggested she knew details about his evening plans that I didn't. That weekend, while Sebastian was allegedly playing golf with business associates, I received a call from my friend Carmen, who worked as a hostess at an upscale restaurant downtown. "I hate to tell you this," Carmen said hesitantly, "but I saw Sebastian last night at the restaurant with a young woman. They were very affectionate. I thought you should know." When I described Sophia to Carmen, she confirmed it was the same woman. They had dined at an intimate table, holding hands and behaving like a couple. Sebastian had introduced Sophia to other diners as his special friend, making no mention of being married. The final confirmation came through a misdirected text message. Sebastian's phone chimed one morning while he was in the shower. Thinking it might be urgent, I glanced at the screen to see a message from S. Chen. "Last night was incredible. When can we go away together again?" Scrolling through previous messages revealed the full extent of their relationship. Photos, intimate conversations, and plans for weekend getaways, all while I had been working to support our household before the inheritance. The evidence suggested their affair had begun shortly after Eleanor's funeral, during a time when I thought Sebastian was grieving and adjusting to his mother's death. That evening, I confronted Sebastian with the evidence. I placed his phone on the kitchen table along with credit card statements showing hotel charges and expensive dinners. I told him what Carmen had seen and asked for the truth. Sebastian's reaction progressed from shock to denial to anger within seconds. He accused me of spying and invading his privacy. When I remained calm and pointed to the evidence, his strategy changed completely. "Fine," he said with cold detachment. "Yes, I'm seeing Sophia. So what? I deserve to be happy." "You're married," I reminded him, struggling to process his callousness. "To someone who can't give me what I need," he replied. "Sophia understands my ambitions and appreciates my success. She sees my potential instead of trying to keep me grounded in mediocrity." The cruelty escalated as he compared us, describing Sophia's youth, enthusiasm, and willingness to enjoy the lifestyle his wealth could provide. Each word was precisely calculated to cause maximum pain. "I settled for you," Sebastian continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "You were safe and stable when I needed that. But I resented how Mother preferred you, how she would ask your opinion instead of mine. Did you enjoy being the perfect daughter she never had?" His accusations were so contrary to reality that I could barely form responses. He was rewriting our entire history, casting himself as the victim and me as someone who had held him back. This from the man I had supported through law school while working double shifts to pay our bills. "I supported you for years," I said, fighting back tears. "I believed in you when you doubted yourself." "You supported me because you could control me," he countered. "You loved being the responsible one, making me feel small with your constant practicality. Admit it, you stayed because you thought Mother would eventually leave us money and you wanted your share." His rewriting of our relationship was breathtaking in its audacity. I had been the one working 16-hour days to support his education, while he pursued his career ambitions. I had been the one caring for his dying mother while he avoided difficult emotions. Yet somehow I was the manipulative one seeking financial gain. Despite the devastating revelations, part of me still wanted to save our marriage. I suggested counseling, reminding him of the promises we had made and the life we had planned together. I offered to sign a postnuptial agreement if he was concerned about the money. Sebastian laughed coldly at my suggestions. Counseling won't fix this. I've moved on. You should too. The next morning, Sebastian informed me he had contacted divorce attorneys and expected me to move out of our apartment within the week. The apartment lease was in his name, and he had already given notice to terminate it, planning to purchase a new home with Sophia. I'm prepared to offer you a fair settlement, he said matter-of-factly. But I want this handled quickly and quietly. No drama, no attempting to drag things out. Standing in what had been our home for 3 years, I looked at the stranger who had replaced my husband and realized that money hadn't changed Sebastian. It had simply revealed who he had always been underneath his carefully constructed facade. The first week after Sebastian's ultimatum was a blur of shock and practical necessities. I found a small furnished apartment near the hospital and began the humiliating process of separating our lives. Many of my personal belongings, including family heirlooms and jewelry from my grandmother, had mysteriously disappeared from our apartment. Sebastian hired Marcus Webb, a notoriously aggressive divorce attorney known for representing wealthy clients in contentious proceedings. The initial settlement offer was insulting, a one-time payment of $25,000 in exchange for releasing all claims to marital property and signing a non-disclosure agreement. I struggled to find legal representation I could afford. After several consultations requiring retainers beyond my means, I found Lisa Rodriguez, a recently licensed attorney willing to take my case at reduced rates. Her inexperience concerned me, but her genuine outrage at Sebastian's proposed terms was reassuring. "This is completely unfair," Lisa said, reviewing the documents. "He's claiming you contributed nothing to marital assets despite supporting him through law school, and offering no alimony despite 6 years of marriage and significant income disparity. The proposed settlement would leave me with virtually nothing after 6 years of marriage, during which I had supported Sebastian's education and career development. The non-disclosure agreement was clearly designed to prevent me from discussing Sebastian's behavior publicly. My financial situation became precarious quickly. Our joint accounts had been drained, and my nursing salary barely covered rent and basic expenses in Scottsdale's expensive housing market. I calculated that my savings would last less than 4 months while covering legal fees and living expenses. Meanwhile, Sebastian's new lifestyle was prominently displayed on social media. Photos showed him and Sophia traveling to Europe, dining at exclusive restaurants, and attending high society events. The contrast between his luxury and my struggle was stark and deliberate. After 6 weeks of legal negotiations, Lisa delivered difficult advice. Fighting a prolonged battle against someone with Sebastian's resources would likely bankrupt me before achieving a favorable outcome. "He can outspend you indefinitely on legal fees," she explained gently. "Sometimes accepting an unfair settlement is the only practical option when the alternative is financial ruin." With reluctance and profound injustice, I agreed to accept a slightly improved offer of $40,000 and 6 months of health insurance coverage. The terms still included the non-disclosure agreement, which I resented but couldn't afford to fight. The day I signed the preliminary settlement agreement, my hand shook so badly I could hardly form my signature. Sebastian wasn't present, having delegated everything to his attorneys. I felt hollowed out, as if something essential had been removed from inside me. For the final divorce meeting, I arrived early at the attorney's office, wearing the most professional outfit I still owned. Sebastian arrived 20 minutes late in a new luxury car, with Sophia waiting outside. He wore an expensive suit and designer watch, looking tanned and relaxed from their recent vacation. The meeting proceeded efficiently, with documents passed for signatures and brief explanations of final terms. I noticed Mr. Pierce, Eleanor's estate attorney, observing the proceedings with an odd expression. When Sebastian rushed the process, eager to finalize everything, Mr. Pierce's eyebrows raised slightly, but he said nothing. As I signed the last document officially ending our marriage, Sebastian immediately stood and headed for the door. "My attorney will handle any remaining details," he said without looking at me. "I have another appointment." Before leaving, he turned back briefly. "I wish you well, Margot. I truly do." The insincerity was the final insult. 2 days after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected call from a man who introduced himself as Robert Chen, Eleanor's personal attorney for confidential matters. "I handled Mrs. Blackwood's most private legal affairs for 20 years, he explained. "There are additional matters regarding her estate that require your attention. Would you be willing to meet with me?" My initial reaction was suspicion. Was this another tactic from Sebastian? I hesitated, explaining that the divorce was already complete. "This is unrelated to your divorce proceedings," Robert assured me. "Or rather, it's related, but not in the way you might think. Please, Mrs. Blackwood, this meeting will be beneficial for you." Curiosity overrode caution, and I agreed to meet him the following day. The address led to a small but elegant law firm specializing in estate planning and trusts. Robert proved to be an elderly gentleman with kind eyes and deliberate speech patterns. "Thank you for coming," he said, showing me to a comfortable chair. "Before we begin, I need to ask, did Sebastian initiate your divorce, or did you?" The question seemed odd, but I answered honestly that Sebastian had initiated everything and pushed for quick finalization. Robert nodded, making notes. "And did you contest the divorce or attempt reconciliation?" I explained my attempts to save the marriage through counseling suggestions, but Sebastian had been adamant about ending things quickly and completely. "That confirms what I suspected," Robert said, seeming relieved. He opened a drawer and removed a sealed envelope. Eleanor Blackwood was not just my client, but my friend for 2 decades. She confided her concerns about Sebastian's character and judgment regarding money and relationships. He placed the envelope before me. Eleanor created a secondary will document with specific instructions that it only be revealed under certain conditions. My confusion must have been evident, because Robert continued with a gentle smile. "Mrs. Blackwood, did you actually read the complete will yourself, or did you rely on the summary provided during the reading?" I realized I had never read the document entirely, assuming the attorney had covered all relevant points during the public reading. Robert opened the envelope and placed a document before me. The $45 million inheritance to Sebastian was indeed specified, but with conditions that had been deliberately minimized during the initial reading at Eleanor's specific instruction. My hands trembled as I read the highlighted section. "The aforementioned sum of $45 million is bequeathed to my son Sebastian Blackwood conditional upon his remaining married to Margot Gomez for a minimum period of 7 years following my death. Should Sebastian initiate divorce proceedings or legal separation from Margot within this 7-year period, 85% of the remaining principal and accumulated interest shall immediately revert to Margot Gomez, to be placed in a trust under her sole control." Below the formal language was a personal letter from Eleanor, handwritten and addressed to me. "My dearest Margot, if you are reading this, then Sebastian has made the choice I feared he would. I have watched you support my son emotionally, financially, and professionally for years, displaying the responsibility and character he lacks. I have observed his growing resentment of our relationship and his sense of entitlement regarding wealth he has not earned. This provision is not meant to trap either of you in an unhappy marriage, but to protect you should Sebastian reveal his true nature once significant wealth enters the equation. You have been more of a daughter to me than Sebastian has been a son in many ways, demonstrating the values I tried unsuccessfully to instill in him. I cannot buy happiness, but in your hands I trust this money will be used to help others and create positive change. Forgive an old woman's manipulation, but I had to ensure justice would prevail and that my life's work would continue through someone who shares my values. Use this gift to build the meaningful life you deserve and to help others as you have always done. Remember that character, not wealth, determines a person's true value. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading Eleanor's words. The room seemed to shift around me as I understood the full implications. Is this legally enforceable? I asked, my voice barely audible. Completely, Robert confirmed. Eleanor created an ironclad trust with these specific conditions. Sebastian's attorney was legally obligated to inform him of these terms during the will reading. But he never mentioned any conditions to me, I said, pieces falling into place. He pushed the divorce through as quickly as possible. Robert's expression darkened. That suggests Sebastian discovered the terms afterward and attempted to finalize the divorce before you became aware. This constitutes potential fraud and legal malpractice. Before I could respond, my phone began vibrating continuously. Text messages and missed calls from Sebastian flooded the screen, each more desperate than the last. We need to talk immediately. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Please call me. It's urgent about Mother's will. Robert observed the notifications with raised eyebrows. It appears Sebastian has just learned about our meeting. That evening, as I sat in my small apartment processing the revelation, someone began pounding on my door. Through the peephole, I saw Sebastian, but he looked completely different from the confident man who had discarded me weeks earlier. Gone was the arrogant posture and expensive clothes. Before me stood someone pale and shaken, his hair disheveled and his designer shirt wrinkled. The transformation was shocking. "Margot, please," he began, his voice trembling. "There's been a terrible mistake. I need to explain everything." "What mistake exactly?" I asked through the chain-locked door. "The divorce," he said quickly. "It was hasty and unnecessary. I was confused, grieving Mother's death. I wasn't thinking clearly about what really mattered." "You seemed very clear when you told me I was holding you back," I replied. Sebastian flinched. "I didn't mean those things. I was under enormous pressure. The inheritance, the responsibility, the expectations. I said terrible things I'll regret forever." His performance might have been convincing if I hadn't just read Eleanor's letter and understood the true situation. I studied his face, seeing calculation behind the apparent remorse. "I still love you," he continued desperately. "We can fix this. We can reconcile and start over. I'll make everything up to you, I promise." I asked the question that would reveal everything. "When did you find out about the clause in your mother's will?" The guilty flicker in his eyes and momentary hesitation told me everything. Robert's suspicion was correct. Sebastian had known about the condition all along and gambled that I wouldn't discover it until after the divorce was finalized. "The divorce is already final, Sebastian," I said quietly. The facade crumbled instantly. Sebastian's composure collapsed completely as the full weight of his situation hit him. He had lost not just $38 million, but his marriage, his integrity, and any chance of redemption. "Please," he begged, falling to his knees in the hallway. "You don't understand. I've already spent millions. I bought properties, invested in startups, made commitments based on having that money. Sophia left when the money situation became unclear. I need your help, Margot." The irony was overwhelming. "You need my help," I repeated. "I got carried away," he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. The money, the attention, the lifestyle, it was intoxicating. I wasn't thinking clearly. I made terrible mistakes. Looking at him begging in my apartment hallway, I thought about how differently I would have handled sudden wealth. I would have secured our future, expanded my nursing career, maybe started the healthcare consulting business I had dreamed about. I would have honored Eleanor's memory by using the money responsibly. "You were right about one thing, Sebastian," I said finally. "I am useless to you now." Sebastian's desperate attempts to reconcile grew increasingly frantic over the following days. Expensive flower arrangements arrived at my apartment and workplace until I asked building management to refuse them. Jewelry appeared with notes begging for another chance. He waited outside the hospital after my shifts, making scenes that embarrassed us both. When gifts failed, Sebastian enlisted mutual friends and former colleagues to plead his case. Most saw through his sudden change of heart, but a few suggested I consider reconciliation, for both your sakes. None knew about the will's conditions, protected by attorney-client privilege. His promises escalated to absurd levels. He vowed to put all remaining assets in my name. He offered to sign contracts giving me complete financial control. He suggested we renew our vows in an elaborate ceremony to prove his commitment. Each proposition revealed that his focus remained entirely on recovering the money, not on rebuilding our relationship. Meanwhile, Robert Chen moved swiftly to enforce Eleanor's will provisions. We filed the necessary legal documents to activate the trust clause, triggering immediate response from Sebastian's attorneys. They filed a countersuit claiming fraud and undue influence, alleging I had manipulated Eleanor into creating the conditional bequest. The legal proceedings revealed disturbing evidence about Sebastian's actions. Email records showed he had indeed known about the will's conditions from the initial reading, but had paid his attorney additional fees to minimize their discussion. Bank transfers documented millions already spent on luxury purchases and high-risk investments. Most damning were text exchanges with Sophia discussing strategies to finalize everything before Margot gets suspicious. The judge assigned to our case, Judge Patricia Martinez, had 30 years of experience in estate law and made her disapproval of Sebastian's behavior clear during preliminary hearings. When evidence of legal malpractice came to light, she referred the matter to the State Bar Association for investigation. After 4 months of legal proceedings, the court ruled entirely in my favor. The trust provision was deemed valid and enforceable, with Sebastian's attempts to circumvent it through deception constituting clear violation of his mother's legally expressed wishes. With the ruling finalized, I suddenly found myself responsible for managing approximately $38 million. The enormity overwhelmed me initially. Unlike Sebastian's impulsive approach, I assembled a team of legitimate financial advisors, a certified financial planner, tax attorney, and investment specialist with fiduciary responsibility. We developed a conservative strategy focused on preserving capital while generating sustainable income. I allocated funds across multiple categories: secure investments, retirement planning, charitable giving, and a modest portion for personal use. I remained in my small apartment, unwilling to make major lifestyle changes until fully processing everything that had happened. Sebastian's family, who had been distant during our marriage, suddenly became intensely interested in reconciliation. His aunt called repeatedly, first attempting guilt about family loyalty, then suggesting I was being vindictive by keeping money that belonged to the Blackwood family. When I remained firm, they progressed to implied legal threats about contesting the will, followed by offers of private settlements if I would share the inheritance with Sebastian. Their final attempt was a staged encounter at a restaurant where they brought an apparently repentant Sebastian to apologize publicly. I excused myself immediately and later sent a clear message through Robert that all communication should go through our respective attorneys. Throughout this period, I gradually reconnected with my own family, who had grown distant during my marriage due to Sebastian's subtle isolation tactics. My parents were shocked by the full story, having seen only the sanitized version I had presented over the years. "We always sensed something was wrong," my mother admitted. "But you seemed determined to make it work, so we didn't interfere." Friends I had neglected while supporting Sebastian welcomed me back warmly. Carmen, who had first alerted me to Sebastian's infidelity, became a particularly strong supporter, offering perspective when I doubted myself and celebrating small victories in my recovery. Therapy became essential for my healing process. Dr. Sarah Kim helped me recognize patterns of emotional manipulation I had accepted as normal and understand how my boundaries had been gradually eroded during the marriage. We worked through the trauma of betrayal while building healthier expectations for future relationships. "What's remarkable," Dr. Kim noted after several months, "is not just that you survived this betrayal, but that you've maintained your compassion while establishing necessary boundaries." As the legal situation stabilized, Sebastian's behavior became increasingly erratic. When charm failed to achieve reconciliation, he resorted to harassment. He spread rumors among mutual acquaintances about me stealing his inheritance. Late-night phone calls came from unknown numbers, revealing his intoxicated state as he alternated between pleading and accusations. After he appeared uninvited at 3 different locations where I was meeting friends, I reluctantly filed for a restraining order. The court granted it immediately based on evidence of persistent unwanted contact and escalating behavior. During this challenging period, I found myself returning to the healthcare consulting idea Eleanor had first suggested years earlier. With financial freedom to pursue it properly, I consulted industry experts, refined my concept, and conducted thorough market research. The boutique consulting firm I designed focused on helping hospitals and clinics create healing environments that supported both patient recovery and staff well-being. I combined my nursing expertise with the design knowledge Eleanor had encouraged me to develop. I found an ideal location for a small office, designed the space to reflect professional warmth, and developed service packages targeting healthcare facilities needing evidence-based design guidance. Rather than trading on my sudden wealth, I built the business on genuine expertise and work ethic. 6 months after launching, I secured my first major client, a children's hospital planning a new wing. The project allowed me to apply everything Eleanor had taught me about creating spaces that support healing and hope. The positive feedback and referrals that followed validated that my success came from skill rather than inheritance. When a healthcare design magazine featured my firm in a Rising Stars article, the satisfaction far exceeded any emotion related to the inheritance. This was something I had built based on knowledge earned through years of hard work and Eleanor's mentorship. The contrast between Sebastian's approach to sudden wealth and my own couldn't have been starker. While he had sought immediate gratification and status symbols, I focused on creating something sustainable that would benefit others. The money itself was never the goal, it was a tool enabling me to build something meaningful. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I barely resembled the devastated woman who had signed those papers. The physical transformation reflected inner healing. I stood straighter, spoke more confidently, and smiled genuinely again. My consulting business had expanded to include 3 employees and a larger downtown office. Each day brought new challenges that fully engaged my mind and talents. The confidence in my voice and manner was earned through overcoming adversity rather than granted by wealth. Regular therapy sessions had helped me process the betrayal without letting it define me. I developed daily practices supporting ongoing healing, journaling to track emotional progress, meditation to stay grounded during major changes, and building a support network of authentic friendships based on mutual respect. Dating came slowly and cautiously. My first attempts were coffee meetings that never progressed as I was still learning to trust my judgment of character. Eventually, I enjoyed pleasant dinner dates with men who seemed genuinely kind, though I remained transparent about not being ready for serious commitment. The best part about dating now, I told Carmen, is that I know exactly what my boundaries are and feel no guilt about maintaining them. As my business thrived, I expanded services beyond initial projections. The staff I hired brought complementary skills, creating a collaborative environment where everyone contributed to our success. Industry recognition came through design awards and speaking invitations at conferences, validating that my vision had real value. 8 months into the business, I established the Eleanor Blackwood Foundation using a significant portion of the inheritance. The foundation focused on healthcare design education and supporting young women pursuing careers in nursing and healthcare architecture. We offered scholarships for disadvantaged students and mentorship programs for aspiring professionals. Healing environments don't just happen, I explained at the foundation's launch event. They require knowledge, intention, and commitment to putting patient well-being above profit. This foundation will ensure Eleanor's vision continues through the next generation. The foundation became the most meaningful use of Eleanor's gift, transforming wealth into opportunity for others. Each scholarship recipient and successful mentee reinforced that true value comes from creating positive change, not accumulating possessions. 18 months after our divorce, I encountered Sebastian unexpectedly at a medical conference where I was presenting on pediatric healing environments. He was sitting alone in the hotel bar, staring into a nearly empty glass. His appearance shocked me. the designer clothes replaced by an ill-fitting suit, his once styled hair now thinning and unkempt. He noticed me before I could decide whether to acknowledge him. After a moment's hesitation, he approached with none of his former confidence, his posture hunched and uncertain. "Margot," he said quietly, "you look successful." Up close, the changes were even more apparent. Stress lines had appeared around his eyes, and he had gained weight in a way suggesting poor health rather than contentment. The transformation was complete. "May I sit for a moment?" he asked, gesturing to an empty chair. Against my better judgment, I nodded. The anger that had once burned intensely had faded to something resembling indifference. "I filed for bankruptcy 6 months ago," he said without preamble. "The investments failed spectacularly. The properties were foreclosed. Sophia left for someone with better prospects long before the money ran out." I remained silent, neither encouraging nor discouraging his confidences. "I realize now what I threw away," he continued, eyes fixed on the table rather than meeting mine. "Not just the money, but everything else. Your support, your integrity, the life we could have built together if I hadn't been so." "Greedy?" I suggested quietly. "Stupid," he said. "Incredibly, devastatingly stupid." For the first time since I had known him, Sebastian's words seemed genuinely reflective rather than calculated for effect. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "A real one, not like before when I was just trying to recover the money. I was cruel to you. I betrayed you after years of your support and love. There's no excuse for how I treated you." I considered his words carefully before responding. "Thank you for saying that, Sebastian." "Mother was right about both of us," he admitted. "She saw who we truly were before we knew ourselves. She protected you from my worst impulses and gave you the chance to become who you were meant to be." The conversation lapsed into silence, neither uncomfortable nor comfortable, simply existing in the space between two people who had once shared everything and now shared nothing but complicated history. "Would it be possible," Sebastian asked hesitantly, "for us to stay in touch occasionally? Not to reconcile," he added quickly, seeing my expression. "Just to talk sometimes as former friends, maybe." I checked my internal response to his request. The boundary felt clear and natural. "I don't think that would be healthy for either of us, Sebastian," I said gently. "I wish you well, truly. I hope you find your way forward, but our paths need to remain separate." He nodded, accepting my decision without argument. As he stood to leave, I noticed he hadn't paid for his drink. Making a split-second decision, I quietly settled his bill, not out of obligation or pity, but as a final gesture of closure. Walking back to my hotel room afterward, I reflected on how completely my understanding of worth had transformed. For years, I had tied my value to what I could provide others, the support I could offer, the stability I could create. Sebastian had defined worth through external validation, possessions, and status. Eleanor had seen through both of us, recognizing that true character reveals itself not when we have nothing, but when we suddenly have everything. Money hadn't corrupted Sebastian, it had simply accelerated and amplified who he already was beneath his carefully constructed facade. The inheritance that Sebastian had viewed as an endpoint had become my beginning. It provided not just financial security but opportunity to create something meaningful aligned with my values. The wealth itself wasn't the gift, the freedom to pursue authentic purpose was. The greatest irony was that in discarding me, Sebastian had lost everything, while through being discarded, I had found myself. The person I had become after weathering betrayal was stronger, wiser, and more authentic than the woman who had desperately tried to save a marriage with someone who valued wealth over human connection. Life after devastation had revealed possibilities I could never have imagined. During those dark days after Sebastian's betrayal, I could never have envisioned the journey from breakdown to breakthrough that would transform not just my circumstances, but my fundamental understanding of resilience and self-worth. Looking toward the future, I felt genuine optimism, not because everything was perfect, but because I had discovered my capacity to create meaning from misfortune. Eleanor's posthumous gift had not been the money itself, but the opportunity to rebuild on a foundation of authenticity rather than accommodation. The betrayal that once threatened to define my story had become merely a chapter in a much larger narrative of growth and self-discovery. For that unexpected transformation, I felt profound gratitude. 2 years later, standing in the completed children's hospital wing that my firm had designed, watching young patients and their families move through spaces created to support healing and hope, I understood Eleanor's legacy in its fullest sense. She had given me not just financial security, but the chance to continue her mission of creating environments that nurture human potential. The little girl in room 237, fighting leukemia with the same determination I had once applied to saving my marriage, looked out her window at the healing garden we had designed. Her smile as she watched butterflies visit the flowers we had chosen specifically to attract them was worth more than any inheritance. "Sometimes," I whispered to Eleanor's memory, "the best gifts come disguised as losses." In the end, Sebastian's betrayal had led me to discover not just who I truly was, but who I was meant to become. And for that, despite everything, I was grateful.